Rendering an animation image sequence is a little bit different in Arnold than it is in other renderers, primarily due to the licensing arrangement with Maya 2017. Let's set up our parameters for the rendering as usual. Go into the render setup, and in the common tab, first put in a file name, and I'm also going to put a file directory so that my sequence will be stored in its own folder and the frames won't get mixed up with anything else. I'll enter a directory name, 04_05_SEQ, and then a slash. And anything after that slash will be the file name. And once again, I'll call it 0405, and I'll spell out the word sequence. The image format, I'll just make a simple PNG. It's going to be an 8-bit format, integer. We need to change the animation extension down here. Set it to name.number.extension. We have the frame range. We'll start on frame 1 and end on frame 20 for the rack focus effect we created in the previous movie. Scroll down a bit. Make sure the renderable camera is set to camera close-up. And I've got a standard definition render here. And even though it's a pretty low resolution render, it may take quite a long time because in our Arnold renderer tab, we previously set the number of camera anti-aliasing samples to 10 and the number of diffuse samples to 5. So those are the render settings, and we can close the render settings dialog and go to the rendering menu set. Let's go into the render menu. And normally you would choose batch render, which causes the rendering to happen in the background so that you can still work in Maya. However, if you don't have a separate license of Arnold installed on your computer, then this Maya command will result in an image sequence that has a watermark burned in. If you want to batch render or command line render in Maya 2017, you have to buy a separate Arnold license from SolidAngle. You can still render a sequence though, and that's what this render sequence command is. However, this command will not allow you to interact with Maya. So once you execute this command, this Maya instance is going to be locked up for however long the render sequence takes or until you kill it. Let's go into the options. And we don't really need to change anything in here except add to render view is kind of helpful. That will allow us to see the rendering as it happens. And we can click render sequence and close. And the render view opens up and our rendering begins. At this point, I cannot work in Maya. And even if I launched another instance of Maya, there might be limitations around the Hypershade or the Arnold render view. This render sequence command gets the job done, and it's okay for students or no-budget productions. But if you need to do any serious Arnold rendering, you'll need to look into buying an Arnold license from SolidAngle. Another way to go would be to look into some cloud rendering service in which you simply upload your scene file, and the rendering service has the appropriate Arnold licenses. And that may be cheaper depending upon how much you need to render. And that's how to use the render sequence command to render an animation in Arnold in Maya 2017. Here's a full screen version of the rendering that I actually did upload to a cloud rendering service in order to save time and to avoid having to buy an Arnold license for my workstation. That concludes the chapter on rendering, and it wraps up the course in the core features of Arnold rendering in Maya.